You probably sprinkled some on your food today and didn't even think twice about it. But what if I told you that that tiny, simple grain of salt holds the key to your consciousness, your ability to move, maybe even your life? Today, we're going to dive deep into the surprisingly wild story of sodium. So picture this. A patient comes into the ER with this terrifying range of symptoms, everything from just mild confusion all the way to seizures and even a life-threatening coma. It sounds like something straight out of a TV medical drama, doesn't it? But the cause is often something surprisingly common. And the answer is a simple sodium imbalance. That's it. It's just a wild reminder of how something we measure in these teeny tiny amounts can trigger a massive, cascading failure in our body's most critical systems. It's kind of like a tiny domino that can topple an entire city. This right here, this is the Goldilocks zone for your body. Your system works 24/7 tirelessly to keep the sodium in your blood within this incredibly narrow range, 135 to 145 milliequivalents per liter. You can think of it like the electrical charge in your blood. And if that charge gets just a little too high or a little too low, the systems that run your entire body start to shut down. So, before we get into all the scary stuff, let's back up a bit. Why is sodium so important in the first place? Well, just think of it as the electrical spark that powers, well, pretty much your entire body. So, sodium is a real multitasker. I mean, it helps your kidneys balance fluids, it keeps your heart beating nice and steady, and it allows your muscles to contract. But there is one organ that is way more sensitive to sodium shifts than any other, and that's the brain. And that is where things get really, really interesting. Okay, so why is the brain such a drama queen when it comes to sodium? It's because sodium is literally the language of your nervous system. Every single thought, every feeling, every action you take is powered by the movement of sodium ions zipping in and out of your nerve cells. It's the master puppeteer pulling all the strings. And look, this is not just some theory from a textbook. In the real world, when a patient shows up in the ER with sudden confusion or seizures, one of the very first things doctors check is their sodium level. The link is that direct and that critical. All right, if you remember one thing from this whole explainer, make it this. Water follows salt. It's a fundamental rule of biology. So if your sodium is low, water floods into your brain cells, causing them to swell up like a balloon. But if your sodium is high, water gets sucked out of them, causing them to shrink. And yeah, either one of those is a total recipe for disaster. So let's break this down. First up, let's look at what happens when your sodium levels get dangerously low. This is what we call the swelling danger, or, the medical term, hyponatremia. Hyponatremia is just when your sodium level drops below that magic number of 135. Now, this can happen if you lose a lot of salt through, say, sweat or being sick. But get this, one of the most common causes is actually drinking too much water. Marathon runners, for instance, are at risk if they only rehydrate with plain water and nothing else. Remember our rule, right? Water follows salt. So with low sodium in the blood, water just floods into the brain cells, causing them to swell up. The huge problem here is that your brain is stuck inside this hard, bony box, your skull. So as the brain swells, the pressure inside your head skyrockets. And that's what triggers all those scary neurological symptoms. So what are the signs you should be looking for? Well, doctors use this handy mnemonic, salt loss. S is for stupor or coma, A for anorexia or nausea, L for lethargy. You get the idea. It's a really powerful way to remember the danger signs, from the really mild ones all the way to the life-threatening ones. All right, let's completely flip the script. What happens when you have way too much sodium? This is the shrinking danger, the opposite problem, also known as hypernatremia. So hypernatremia is what happens when your sodium level climbs above 145, and it's usually caused by dehydration. When you lose water, the salt in your blood just gets more and more concentrated. It's kind of like boiling a pot of salt water on the stove. As that water boils off and evaporates, what's left behind gets super, super salty. So what's going on inside the brain during all this? Well, that high concentration of salt in your blood acts like this powerful magnet, just sucking the water right out of your brain cells. And this cellular dehydration causes the cells to literally shrink and shrivel, which, as you can imagine, leads to all sorts of problems. The very first sign of high sodium is something every single one of us has felt, that intense, desperate thirst. That's your brain basically screaming, "Hey, I need water, now!" And if you don't listen, your dehydrated nerve cells start to get really irritable, leading to agitation, muscle twitches, and yeah, just like with low sodium, confusion and seizures. Okay, so we've seen both extremes, right? A swollen brain and a shrunken brain. Both are just incredibly dangerous. So the big question is, how do we get things back to that perfect balance? Or, even better, how do we just stay there?
And you know what? The treatment is actually pretty logical. It's a perfect mirror image. If you have low sodium, you either need to get rid of that excess water or you need to add more salt. And if you have high sodium, you got to add more water and cut back on the salt. It's all about getting back to that sweet spot.
Now, the really good news here is that for most of us, preventing this is pretty straightforward. Drink water when you're thirsty, but don't overdo it. If you're out there sweating up a storm, maybe grab a sports drink that has electrolytes, not just plain old water. And if you have an older relative, just gently remind them to stay hydrated, because our sense of thirst can kind of fade as we get older. Okay, and here is a really fascinating and absolutely crucial point. When doctors treat a severe sodium imbalance, they have to go incredibly slowly. Why? Because slamming the system back to normal too fast can cause this massive rebound fluid shift in the brain, and that can be even more dangerous than the original problem. The brain just needs time to adjust.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, you can think of sodium as the quiet, unseen conductor of your body's orchestra. When that conductor is on point, you get this beautiful symphony of health. But the second they're off, the whole performance just descends into chaos. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the smallest things have the biggest impact.
So there you have it, the incredible hidden power of a single grain of salt. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other simple, everyday things are we overlooking that hold the key to our health? Anyway, something to chew on. Thanks for joining me.